Okay, welcome, Christina. Actually, Christina, I
Thank
was just
you.
about to launch into my first question here, but I'll first let you say hello to Deborah.
Hi, Deborah. So nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan
Yeah.
of your work, and you've helped me so much as a mother.
Thank you.
Deborah has two littles, 1 and 3. So,
Oh yeah, I have a 1-year-old, and he's almost 1, and an almost 3.5-year-old. So I am in the thick of it right now.
Thick of the little times.
yes.
Yeah.
So what I had just was about to ask was just for the unfamiliar, people who aren't familiar with the idea, was to have a bit of a fuller picture on what it actually means. Like, what is the difference between the behaviorist model versus the developmental model of understanding children, so that we can kind of move forward in the conversation with people having a really good context. And you articulate this so well, Deborah, that it would be good to hear your, your definition of that.
Well, this is really the underpinnings of everything. You'll find yourself in one side or the other. If you're a developmentalist, you are more like the gardener who believes it is your job as a parent to create the conditions for healthy growth and development from the inside out. If you fit more into the behavioral model, which is actually the more dominant model, which has been around for well over 100 years, this idea that we shape behavior from the outside, that as parents we use the tools of consequences, threats, bribes, punishments to teach a child how to be mature, to teach a child what's right from wrong, and that if a child is given the right lessons, then one should be conceivably mature, that it is lessons that make you grow up. Now, we all know adults who've had lots of lessons but failed to learn them. So what you start to understand is that, there's something else going on here. And that is essentially that in a developmental model, in a behavioral model, there was no room for emotion or instincts. That's where the developmentalists live, that there are innate drivers of development that we come with. Just as our legs and arms know how to grow, so does our psychological growth towards maturity. And so we can't ignore the role of emotion and instinct. And now neuroscience has come squarely behind that and said, no, actually, this is actually the most important thing. Emotion is the most important driver of development, and so we really have to think about this. What was once eclipsed is no longer eclipsed anymore, and so it is absolutely turning things over. What is also very important to understand in terms of distinguishing the two is that, and you can go right back into Skinner's and Rogerian, who were sort of Skinner's and Carl Rogers, who were kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum and are held up as the sort of fathers in this area, is that Skinner basically said, a child, you hold over a child's head your praise and your encouragement and your essentially love to get compliance. That's how you get a child to do what you want. And Rogers was affronted by that and said, no, that's not what you hold over their head. That's what you give them because of their birthright, and that's the basis for your relationship. And why would you why would you do this kind of, in a dialogue they once had? And Skinner's came back and said, well, how will you get them to do anything if you don't hold it over their head? And Rogers said, well, how will they become their own person if you make them work for love? And so here you have the fundamental divide, and you've got to figure out what side you're on. Many people say, well, I do a little bit of both. Yes, I understand that. But philosophically, how is it that you think we grow up to become mature? It's not a foregone conclusion. Lessons don't do it. Consequences won't make you more mature. A discipline won't fix a problem. It might buy yourself some time, but ultimately it doesn't answer the question of maturity. And that's, in essence, what's most important here.
And this is the question that, all parents have burning on their mind, even if they're interested, they think, okay, this makes so much sense to me, but how do I make them do things? How do I make them do what I want them to do, right? Those are hard. So we want to start off a little more philosophically and move toward the practical, but that's ultimately where we end up. Well, how do I get them to do stuff, right?
And how do I get them to not do things I don't want them to?
And you go back and you ask a different question, which will give you a bit of a different lens. How is it that a child wants to do the right thing? How is it that a child is moved to follow, to obey, to listen, to share your values, to adopt it? How does a child come to be similar to a parent? Is this the function of lessons? No, it's not. And so when you change your question and we don't get focused in just what to do's, and we say, how is a child moved? How does a child, come to adopt, the mannerisms of the parent? You understand that there's much more than lessons here at play. Attachment is the strongest force in the universe, and it actually brings our children to us and makes them want to follow us. If a child is following you, then you can teach them just about anything you want to teach them. But if you don't have their heart, you're going to find you're going to have some battles, and that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Christina, feel free to jump in with whatever questions.
Why do you think the behaviorist model is still so dominant in our culture when it is relatively, in the grand scheme of human history, it's still a new idea. It's 100 years old, give or take. Why is it so dominant still today? Even though I think many parents of my generation, I'm on the older end of the millennials, would probably not be okay with spanking or corporal punishment. Still, the concept of timeouts and separation-based discipline and bribing and rewards and consequences and all of that is so prevalent and seen as like a better alternative to spanking and corporal punishment. Why is it that that's still so sticky? Why is it stuck around for as long as it has?
Well, I'll answer this, I guess, from more of a parent perspective, is I think that we're looking for results. And sometimes these can bring very fast-acting results. You can use very heavy-handed approaches. Not in our books it's heavy-handed, but to the child's emotional system it feels very heavy-handed, like separation-based discipline. I can take away what you care about. You can be separated from my love or caretaking or whatever, or your brother, your sister, whatever it is you care about. And what we don't realize is that the quick-acting, so-called quick-acting effects we get are because of the alarm system that you've now hijacked into high gear, that a child capitulates out of desperation, but not necessarily out of security. It's the same thing with our sleep training, quite frankly. We've moved to very crying extinction-based training around sleep, not understanding what the defensive costs were here. You could actually apply this to any discipline in parenting, whether it be food, whether it be sleeping, whether it be discipline, that we get these very fast-acting, quick responses because you jack up the stress, which then basically can move the brain into a defensive position, and you're using alarm to fix the problem. But when you use alarm, you have a bigger problem. You've got a relationship problem. Then you've got an insecurity issue, potentially, if you keep using these over and over. But parents don't understand because our eyes can be fooled. Oh, well, they just started to obey. I yelled and they followed. Well, yes, you're using the alarm system, but over and over and over again. And then we end up with increasing alarm problems in our children. And we say, well, where is this all coming from? We're not at war. Why do our children seem to be more anxious, have problems paying attention, seem to be more aggressive, aren't following their adults more? Where's all this alarm coming from? They should be doing really well. And that may seem like an oversimplification, but when you actually understand the emotional system, you can't just alarm a child one point and then have them feel secure in your care another time. You got to pick how you're going to do this. So it's very fast acting on the surface. It solves a problem quickly, but for the wrong reasons, usually for reasons of alarm. And I think parents today, in all honesty, we just lack confidence in what we have to offer. I think we have far too many parenting experts, books, and people telling us what to do, that we can't listen and find what is within us that already knows what to do and knows how we want to take care of our child. Sometimes I think we just need to sit with our questions a little longer. I think we need to have more confidence in ourselves. And we need to understand that we've been parenting long before there were parenting books and parenting experts. And I apologize for my contribution, but I feel compelled to say that in a book.
We welcome it.
I know that,
read all the books. We don't read any books, but this one.
If a parent said, I can find my way through, Deb, and I don't need this, and sometimes I just don't even answer the question, and parents find their way through, and it's like, but isn't that what it's supposed to be? Isn't that how it's meant to be, right? But we've become so detached from that, so less confident, I think, in what we have to offer our kids. And so we resort to contrived methods of control. We just don't think it through.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that I think the last few generations has been really stuck in the whole carrot and stick thing, because it seems like it's nicer than, being hard-handed or being a pushover, right? So you just started speaking about anxiety, and that was one of the things we were, Christine and I were talking about, was that, we see a lot of anxiety in children these days, right? So, can you speak to the idea that anxiety in children is related to separation? That's, and why we want to avoid separation-based discipline, right? Why we, people think, well, I'm not separating myself from my child. I'm just giving them a consequence or a reward for their whatever behavior. Sort of, why is anxiety related to separation-based? What is kind of separation-based looking like, on a psychological level?
So I was just going to say before I forget this part is that there's a wonderful talk that Gordon Neufeld gave at the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education. It's on YouTube, and it's called Making Sense of Anxiety. It's going to,
yes,
yeah, it's excellent, and it's a wonderful resource for any parent. It's probably one of my most top presentations that I refer people to. That's free. It's online. It was beautifully done by the Dalai Lama Center. If we understand the biggest instinct that drives human survival is the attachment instinct. It is an instinct for togetherness, because with togetherness we can get our needs taken care of, right? Like as adults, this is true, and it is also true for our children. If they don't depend upon us, if they don't follow us, their chance of survival on any level, physiological, psychological, is going to be hampered. We're mammal species that have a long trajectory here when it comes to growth, and we need each other. And we need each other as a species to survive. We don't have big claws. We don't have good eyesight, smell. We're not very fast runners when it comes to everything. But what we do have is an incredible instinct for togetherness, which we do share with our mammal species. So if we understand that attachment and togetherness is our fundamental wiring, it's the most important instinct that everything in the brain is organized around, then what is the greatest threat?
Separation.
Exactly. So they're two sides of the same coin. So in order to understand separation, you have to understand attachment. And so you dance together. So when you use approaches that threaten the relationship, now it doesn't mean that you don't set limits. It doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that you don't say no. Oh my goodness, no. You have to do those things.
A great word.
You'll have big problems on your hand with a child who takes the lead, who actually can be quite anxious, who doesn't follow. You can have incredible problems if we don't have someone who can lead. But leading shouldn't hurt. Like in the sense that we shouldn't used to have to hurt our children in order to get them to follow. They're not following us. They're really just capitulating. So separation-based discipline basically is an encounter with the opposite of what you need. I will take this away. You can't be with me. I don't want to be around you when you are like that. Well, is the relationship conditional or not? Unconditional or not? Is the relationship for life or not? Is it unwavering or not? Is it going to exist if I'm good, bad, or ugly? Like, how can you feel secure if there's only a narrow window in which you are invited into someone's presence? There's no generosity there. Oh, yeah. Like the whole purpose of an unconditional invitation is there's generosity, regardless of conduct and behavior. It doesn't mean agreement with those things. Oh my goodness. No, they're immature and they need you to guide this way. But what shouldn't be up for grabs is the relationship, the sense that I can't handle you, don't want to be around you, that somehow because you haven't been good enough. And I can tell you this, if there's been anything that has impacted my work most fundamentally on any level that in working with Gordon, it has been his statement that we liberate our children not by making them work for love, but by letting them rest in it. And that is everything. It means that you have to stretch when your child's frustrated. How am I going to handle my frustration? Not take it out on my child? Because you are frustrated as a parent. Give me a break. We get frustrated all the time. Yeah. But it's not our children to carry our emotions. It's not their job. It's not their job to have to deal with our immaturity. They will likely have to deal with it over the course of their lives. But we try to spare them as much as we can. The reality is that we work at matters of love and not them. Separation-based discipline makes you work for love. I have to be good enough, kind enough, warm enough, listen enough, not frustrated enough. I have to check it all in. I have to commit psychological anorexia so my parent can handle me. That's the message. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow,
You
that's a big
with
phrase.
that. There's no
Yeah,
good root. You can't have deep roots that way. They can only be as deep as
yeah.
the invitation your parent has. If you're not invited to have frustration, guess what I deal in counseling with as in private practice? Helping people understand their frustration because it wasn't invited. How do understand your alarm? How to understand all the emotions that your parents couldn't handle, or maybe they
Hmm.
could, but these discipline methods said, to the child that they couldn't. There are many times when I have found that parents were far more generous than their children ever knew when they ended up, parents just bought into this kind of, well, what's the discipline strategy? Okay, I'll just use that. But my goodness, do I ever see in parents this incredible generosity to stretch that I think their kids miss out on when we just buy these disciplinary programs and think this is the way to do it.
I
Yeah.
think there is this fear in many parents, especially in my generation, of being judged by others, by other parents, or by their parents for being too soft on their kids if they don't use separation-based discipline. I mean, I've been told by relatives to lock my child in a room, to get them to go to sleep on their own, to take a nap on their own, that he's the one in charge because I won't do that, things like that. So I think there's this, we want the freedom to follow our instincts and to do what really does feel the most right in terms of attachment to our children. But I do think there's also this pressure that especially people in my age range feel, to have your kids behave perfectly, in public and in other people's houses and at restaurants and all these things where, I mean, it's just completely unrealistic and unfair to have these expectations of small children. But I still find myself making excuses or apologizing for my kid, or, just rationalizing their behavior because and it's all about me. It's about me feeling like some people are judging me because my kid isn't behaving perfectly. And I think we just have to let that go. I mean, that's something I need to work through. It's not my child's fault.
Exactly. One of the most freeing things Gordon ever said to me when I was working with him was, because I was expressing the exact same thing, Christina, and he said, take your child out of the room. People can think whatever they want. If you're at a public pool, take your child out to the car. They can think you're spanking them. They can think you're yelling at them. They can think you're punishing them. They can think you're being tender. Doesn't matter. But if you take the child, if you can at all, in whatever circumstances you can, take the child out of the situation so that you can deal with it in the way that does feel right without feeling like, all the judgy people, we're such a judgy culture.
That's very good advice.
And it's a very common question. I get asked this. I get asked this all the time, this question. And I think it comes back to that confidence as a parent. Where does it come from? It doesn't come from looking at other people and saying that they agree with you, because you're never going to find that consensus. And quite frankly, they didn't have the science that was involved that we have now. Parents today have incredible information. We don't have the same kind of culture that we once had to raise our children in, but we have science, and I can tell you, it's incredible to have that. So, but this is the confidence I'm talking about. Like, when I think about apologizing, I'm usually apologizing to my children for how adults treat them. Because there's been some real doozies sometimes, right? And, you know what, Grandma's just having a hard day, yeah, you know what, he's just, whatever, don't take it into your heart, just sometimes.
Yeah. You won't be apologizing.
Can't hear you. They don't understand. They're just, and I'm apologizing more for the adults on that end. But, here is a wonderful place. And as a parent, I'll tell you, you have to sit in this place and decide who you're going to take care of. Who are you going to take care of? I'll tell you, as a developmentalist, this is my prime directive. And when I got this and I landed on this, I've never wavered a day since. And that development must always go. The conditions, the good conditions that we have, all of our energy that we have, must go to the one who has the most potential for growth and development. That is our prime directive. Who has the potential for growth and development here in terms of their state of development? Well, our children do. So if you have to choose the right people.
Yeah. That makes
Kind,
total sense.
political, whatever you need to do. You don't have to put this in people's faces. I don't expect Grandpa to change. Just, Grandpa likes cars. We'll bring cars over next time, or read a book with Grandpa because that's what Grandpa likes. But is Grandpa gonna, think this is okay? Probably not. So sometimes you have to get in the way of stuff, right? Around food and picky eating. Oh my goodness. If I didn't hear 100 times, well, why don't they like meat? Why don't they like meat? They have to eat meat. I'm like, listen, man, we're gonna run out of meat. She's got the healthiest diet. Like, you need to back up people. People just on and on about meat. Blah, blah, blah. It's just people, everybody's got to have their say. You're the shield. You're the shield. If you can't get in the way of that, communicate to their child that they're fine the way they are. Don't take out people that are important in their lives. Don't, take those relationships and throw them away. But at the same time, you better be a shield. You got to buffer. The only thing left to buffer around our kids anymore are their children. That's it. Culture used to buffer. We used to know a lot better how to treat and talk to kids, but I don't think we have any sense of some of that stuff anymore. People don't think twice about taking a parent out in front of their child, talking about the parent in front of a child about that parent. Give me a break. That parent is supposed to be for that child. You never get in the way of that relationship. That is sacred. That child doesn't have a chance without that parent. If you have to have a conversation, you don't do it in front of the parent. We don't have our manners anymore this way. So as a parent, you got to stick your landing and say, my child is the one that I have to feel my guilt and my responsibility and my apologies for. Maybe not tell them all that. But the rest of the world, I'll manage them. And you know what? They better watch out, because I am the parent this child needs. And I'm going to take care of them. No apologies. It's not an apology tour, parenting. It's not an apology tour. You know what? That's okay. But we all we don't feel confident all the time. But just stick your landing as much as you can.
Yeah, my dad used to call me Mama Bear. Just don't get into it with her. And we would have experiences like going, say, into a doctor's office or a dentist office or something, and them saying, actually, we prefer the parents don't go in. And I would say, then I'll go to another dentist. Thank you. I will go in. I am that child's advocate, and I'm the only one, right? So it's so true. And we just have to kind of be strong, right? We just kind of have to be strong. And we, like you say, there's not much point. In my early years, I tried to convince people of the rightness of me.
I'm tired for that. I'm too tired and old.
Oh, it's exhausting. It is. Yeah.
So I'm finally getting there where I'm like, you know what? I don't need to explain it to everyone. I would love for everyone to agree with me, but I don't have to have everybody agree with me.
Oh, yeah.
So since you're attachment-based sort of developmentalist, I think the word attachment has this connotation in the United States. When people think of attachments parenting, they think bed sharing, baby wearing, breastfeeding, and these practices, these behaviors that I'm confident they do promote healthy attachment if accompanied by other, like a sincere invitation to your child and everything like that. But you don't have to do those things in order to attach, or for your child to attach to you, or for you to attach to your child. But that's where it stops. That's where attachment ends. I think for many people, they think that's what attachment parenting is. And only the people who do those things are doing attachment parenting. And that's it. Like, attachment is just about what you do the first couple of years of life. So can you talk about that? Like, what does attachment actually mean? Yeah. What does a secure attachment look like? And over a whole lifetime, not just in infancy and toddlerhood.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to say on this. What would be most helpful?
Yes, I know it's a big question.
It's a beautiful question. It's an important question.
It really is.
It's a very important question. So first of all, attachment is the science of human relationships. It's a science. It's about how particles in the universe come together. We could be in physics talking about attachment. Like, there's no field where we don't have attachment. You could talk about cooking and how things come together. It's attachment science. But attachment as a science of human relationships came about 70 years ago with John Bowlby's work, and he coined the term attachment. Love has been around, and relationships have been around a lot longer than that. He didn't invent it. He just named it. And as a result, it started to become known as a science, and all sorts of stuff unfolded about it. It got very much caught up with breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and this business with Dr. William Sears. I'm not sure he even envisioned that this is what he was doing, but I think this is what people have taken from it. And attachment got equated with a physical contact. Well, how do you have attachments with your teacher then? Presumably they're not going to co-sleep and breastfeed. I would hope that's not appropriate. How do you have a relationship with grandma or grandpa, or with fathers or aunties and uncles? Like, it was a very superficial form of looking at human relationships. People have recognized that. Now, where are people jumping to these days? They're jumping into the word that you used, actually, secure. Now, where does that word come from? Well, John Bowlby talked about it in terms of having a secure base. But there has been a resurgence of Mary Ainsworth's work, which was based on Joan Bowlby, which says, okay, we've got 4 attachments. She said 3, but now there's 4. Secure, insecure, attachment avoidant, or whatever. Well, oh my goodness, is that also a narrow tunnel that is starting to just close in? And now parents are freaking out. Oh my gosh, I don't have a secure attachment at age 1, so they've got an insecure attachment all their life, and it's just blown out. And I didn't have a secure attachment, so can my child have a secure attachment? Oh my goodness, we've got to get on a different song sheet when it comes to attachment. Attachment is a instinct. It is a life force. We are meant to be together. There are many ways we can be together, but there's 2 key pieces that I would look for from a science point of view, a developmental point of view, to say, do we have a good attachment here forming? And that is child-parent relationship, and I'm not talking about adult here, because again, this is the other thing that happens, is we take adult psychology and we apply it to children. Bad move, like 300,000% over. It's really problematic. So this is for a child-adult relationship, adult-child relationship, is that the adult must lead. The adult must be in the caretaking position. The child must be in the position to receive and to seek the adult's help. The child knows their adult from other adults to say, this is the adult with whom I get my bearings in the world. And that's attachment. That child wants to follow, wants to preserve contact and closeness. When there's separation from that adult, you'll see a separation cry. Don't go, one more story, please. One more, I'm hungry. You see all this kind of stuff at night, right? And then you're like, honey, I'll get to you after I get to the children, right? That's what happens to our spouses. What happened to me? I saw the children go, oh my goodness. But you see all this pursuit and wanting to preserve proximity with you. And then the adult is meant to take the lead, to provide more, to have this invitation, to be generous, to say no when it's required, to hide our needs, not share our needs or our feelings about being their parent. Like, you're the leader. You're the one to take care. You're the answer to that child for their life. Like, it's so vulnerable. That's what a good relationship looks like. Does the child follow the adult? Does the child want to listen most of the time? Does the child want to obey? And then you look for the roots of attachment. And there's 6 primary ways that we unfold as a relational being. And you would find that in any one of us that has this full capacity. In the first year of life, it's about touch, taste, smell, seeing, hearing, feeling, right? In the second year of life, it's about, do you see the child copying and imitating, taking on your language? You can see, kids, when they have friendships, they tend to be very similar or interest to each other. They all like to bike ride, or they all like to do particular, chess or whatever it is. And, grandma and grandpa start to look like each other as they get older. It's like, what's going on here? They're just like melding into each other's sameness. So we have sameness all the way through, but it's still superficial. We can go deeper. By the age of 3, a child wants to belong, wants to have this beginning sense of identity. This is my home. This is my mommy and my daddy. They're very possessive. They, you can think about our affiliation to groups. This is my group. This is my identity. But this is the very beginning birthplace of this. By age 4, you start to see, hopefully, significance. And again, this is if the conditions are right. These aren't a foregone conclusion. I've seen a 14-year-old attached like they were 2. You can see a 50-year-old man who says, I feel like I've fallen in love for the first time. Yes, because the attachment roots are going deeper now. They weren't able to be nourished back then. But at age 50, they've now fallen in love for the first time. It's wonderful. But age 4, they want to be significant to you. They want your eyes to light up. They love to hear stories about you. We all want to matter. We all want to matter somewhere. The sense that we don't matter is deeply wounding. By age 5, if we're unfolding well, it's about love, deep love, emotional intimacy opens up. You can feel real missing, a real sentimentality, about wanting to be connected and feeling fulfilled this way. And by age 6, hopefully it would occur to you that if you're close to someone and given them your heart, that you want to share their secrets with them. And so this is where we start to reveal ourselves in terms of vulnerability. Vulnerability comes as a result of deep connection. Vulnerability isn't something you should have to work on. It is the fruit of a healthy relationship if the relationship has gone deep. Now, what does that tell you about today's adult population? We have to work at something that was meant to be already there as a result of deep connection. So this is how I would measure. This is how I would assess. I've got a 4-year-old. Do we see signs of significance? Do we see signs of belonging and loyalty? Do we see signs of sameness and senses? This is capitulated all the way through the lifespan. How is grandpa talking, in marriage counseling? It's oftentimes you'll get one partner may want to have the level of secrets and psychological intimacy, and the other one just wants, I just want to know I matter to you. Well, you do matter, but I want to share my secrets. I want to hear yours. Well, I just need to know that I'm special and that I matter and that you think of me all the time. Well, yes, but I want to tell you all these things. And you can see this. I'm not going to name any genders here. You can see this mismatch. Under the bus here, but you can see this mismatch sometimes in the level of connection, and it's like, well, let's go in for some counseling to try to marry that up. So this is how I operate in terms of thinking about attachment. Is there a right relationship? Is the adult in the lead with the child? Does this child want to follow, listen, tend to want to do the right things? Or is this child trying to take the lead from the parent? That's not going to work. We got all sorts of problems that happen there with our children who think they're the boss of their parents. No way. That does not work developmentally. And then how deep is the connection? Have they given them their heart? Do they share their secrets? I need that in my teenagers as I need that in my 5-year-old. And not even that. You would hope that your child could call home when you're, 70 and share their heart with you. Yeah. And I wouldn't even call that secure. I just would call that a deep relationship that nourishes you. And here's the secret. If you do it well, your child will invite you back into relationship as an adult, and they will actually hold on to you beyond your grave. Beyond the grave. They will hold you in their head and in their heart. They will have conversations with you. They will hang on to you and they will hear you. And there'll never be a day that they feel separated from you. Why? Because you've had the depth of a relationship that goes beyond time. And that's what a relationship and attachment is to me. It's not, oh, well, they're secure over here. Well, how can they look secure over here and avoidant over here? Well, I don't know. What do we do with that? They have 2 different relationships with people. What do we do with this whole business of co-sleep? It doesn't make any sense. They were wonderful constructs at the time, but they've outlived their utility. We have to go, and that's where Gordon Neufeld, he's brilliant. I mean, his attachment research and distillation of it is unique.
Yeah, it is.
He put it into our hands, right? I want to, there's kind of an important segue to make here, just sort of on based on just what you were saying, and this idea of parents wanting to transition like this a lot of times. And I think that people are so hungry right now. Like I've never seen, we've been doing this for 20, 25 years, and this surgence in the hunger to understand what this is and try and practice it. It's just phenomenal. Like, I mean, you must see it, Deborah, but okay. So first of all, people come with 2 pieces of information. One, okay, I didn't do that. I didn't do those things. Is it too late? Okay. So there are some philosophies that would say, if you miss those first couple of years, you're out of luck. And then the next part of that question, same question, is that how do we make that paradigm shift graciously? We've done X. We want to do X. How do we do that graciously?
Well, I hope that, what a horrible thing is to come awake to something like this and then think you've blown it for life. Like, that's just
Yeah.
cruel. And the answer is no. I mean, till they lower you in the grave, you are working on relationship. There's not a day that you don't work, like you can't take responsibility for this. And we've been doing relationship far before there was relationship science. So we just need to stop
Yeah.
already with ourselves. And, poets have written about it. Musicians have sung about it. This is innate. We don't have to go and learn the more you have to learn about love, the more you're going to screw it up. The more it's in your head and not in your heart. Like, this should be something that moves you. So I would say come from that point of view. Please don't work at it too much. Like, listen to yourself feeling moved in that direction. It's like, with my kids, I want to be near them, but how do I be near them? Well, they asked me to play Polly Pockets. I'm not playing with those darn things. Are you kidding me? I hate those things. Nothing wrong with Polly Pockets. My kids loved them, but my fingers are too big. But then I would say, well, how do I want to be close to them? Well, I would love to teach them, how to do this. And so I would, do an obstacle course for them. Yeah, so I built obstacle courses over and over, wrestle with them. Oh, I would wrestle with them. And I was moving into relationship. Play was building relationship. Play does this wonderful thing when we're enjoying each other. And we have delight, we have enjoyment and warmth. Attachment research has found that the expression of delight, enjoyment, and warmth builds relationships. Go figure. Go figure. Just go back to what, is that sense inside of you an invitation that I want to be close to my child? Can they feel an invitation? How would you get that across? How would you let your friend know that there was an invitation? So just go back to making it really simple. But I would say there are some rituals around attachment that we can go back to. If you have to go back to the basics, go back to the collecting rituals, which is number one, collecting. Get in a child's face in a friendly way, get a smile, get some eyes, get a nod. What are you playing with? That looks really fun. Oh my goodness, where's that train going? Whatever it is, I wouldn't talk to my teenager that way. I'm like, what are you doing on the TikTok? Who's talking to you now on the TikTok? What the heck is a thirst quencher? A thirst quencher or thirst trap? Okay, well, what's a thirst trap? I'm learning all about TikTok through my children.
Oh, yeah.
What's the good side and the bad side? And it's just I'm paying attention and listening. Undivided attention, delight, enjoyment, warmth. So collecting is about getting in their face in a friendly way. And if you've had some strain in your relationship, maybe aim for 4 or 5 times a day to do that, just to communicate, I'm here, and just watch their eyes, like you're truly listening. And there's a sense of wanting to be close. And if you have to give your child direction on stuff, make sure that you don't always just come in like that, only to tell them what to do. Make sure like you're coming in to just check in. Just check in. Just say hello. It's like when my husband brings me a cup of tea in the morning and I didn't have to ask him. It's like, hello, thank you. You thought of me. Yay. This is fantastic.
Yeah. You feel cared for, right?
You feel thank you. I feel cared for. Mm-hmm. But don't ask them. Like sometimes, oh gosh, I turn on the Googler and I'm looking and there's, the latest social media post. The one question you have to ask your child. I'm like, oh, what is it? Because I have no clue what the answer is. Go and ask them, what is it that I have to do to make you feel loved by me? I'm like, oh my gosh, don't say that. Don't. You should know this. You should know this.
Wow.
You should.
If your child has to tell you
And
that,
you're in charge. So there's all this crazy stuff. So turn off the Googler and just look into delight, enjoyment, and warmth. Be close to your child. Convey that sense of invitation to be close. Be generous with your caretaking where you can. Allowing them to have the emotions that they need to have, but doesn't mean you agree. If you have to disagree, be generous with them feeling upset with you, but lead as you must. The other rituals are bridging and matchmaking. And bridging, very simply, is just when there is separation that comes between you. There's school, well, maybe not for your homeschooling crowd, but there's work or some sort of separation in some way. There could be conduct or performance that creates some sort of separation. Make sure you convey, well, this may need to get done, but we'll find a way through. You're not happy with me about it. We'll get back around to it. We're going to have to find a way through. This isn't, math, as I said to my daughter once in grade 4. Math will be there all the way through. Grade 4 math will be here year after year until you're ready to get grade 4 math done. And then we'll move on to grade 5. But I'm a patient woman and we'll do grade 4 math as long as you need to do grade 4 math. But it's not going away, and we might have had a few tears about it. Not me, but her. And that was okay that she was frustrated with grade 4 math. I do understand that. So we bridge the divide. We bridge the divide that may come up, that conduct and performance, like, I can't let you do that. I can't let you throw that. That's not okay. You don't talk like that. But there's still a sense, I'll take care of you. I'm still here. But, you have to be able to bridge some of the divides that come up and the expectations that are met. And then matchmaking is where basically we take their hands and we take them and introduce them to the village that will take care of them. And, that's really important in the homeschooling community, because you are oftentimes matchmaking with different people who have different skill sets and different programs and different areas of specialty. And you're leading that child into the hands of these other adults and say, they will be here for you, or they will help you. I can count on you, to follow and listen as you would. And you're building the village that children need. Adults have to take the lead now to build the village that kids need. So these are all attachment rituals. Basically, we're just taking responsibility for connection and thinking about how that is represented to a child. There's so much more, but I would say start with the collecting, back away from the separation-based discipline, get into bridging, get into matchmaking.
So can we assume then that, as part of the answer to this question, that children are malleable enough that if we messed up the first few years, that we can get back to it and reconnect and develop that, because my guess is they're starving. Like, if you starved a child for the first 6 years, when you start feeding them, they're going to want to eat, right? They're going to want to eat.
The instincts and the emotions are certainly there to connect. That is for sure. There are some kids that take longer to warm up, and there's some kids that will just warm up quite quickly. It just depends upon the wounding. Depends on what has happened, and so we must go slow. We must make sure that that their receptivity is there, that our invitation is received. Just because we're doing relationship doesn't mean their brain is moving them into relationship with us. Right. We have to wait for signs of receptivity. We have to see what's going on, and if there has been a lot of challenges this way, then I would say, maybe you don't do this walk alone. Maybe that's when you do get some support. Someone, a practitioner at the Neufeld Institute, or someone who's understands the development of relationship. But no, it's not a foregone conclusion. My goodness, it absolutely is not. I've seen some really challenging situations in the first couple of years of life, and just seeing how a child has flourished, like, it would bring tears to your eyes just to see when we change the conditions for the child, how nature just does her job and starts to grow that child and help them flourish to the degree that they can. So no, it's never too late.
Yeah.
Well, one thing one thing that really impressed me, or left an impression upon me from your work and Dr. Neufeld's, is this idea of feeling loved versus feeling taken care of. That all parents pretty much will say, I love my child. I love my kids more than life itself. Even parents who's, are in prison for hurting their children say, I love my kid. But it's whether or not your child feels taken care of by you.
You got it.
That's what matters. It's not how much you subjectively love your child. It's whether they're getting the message that their parent is taking care of them and meeting their needs.
That's it in a nutshell. It took me many years in counseling to realize that was the challenge for so many of my adult clients, is that they'd come in, oh, my parents love me. I know they love me. I know they love me still. And then I would say, well, did you feel taken care of by them? And that would make them pause. No. And you start to see the story unravel. So what does it mean to feel taken care of? Now, it doesn't mean that that's our version of we are taking care of somebody. Like, oh, well, we're checking all the boxes. In our heads, we're checking all the boxes. I'm doing all my caretaking. No. The question is does your child feel taken care of by you? Has the child given you their heart? Does the child trust you? Right? What would it take for a very sensitive child to trust a parent? What does it take for those kids that see and feel and hear too much, that maybe don't fit in? And, your community may have some of these kids that don't, like, you put them, the separation into a school environment and that kind of chaos that they experience. They're like, I'm out of here. They can't function. They can't settle in. They can't find their way. And sometimes just, having stronger connections, all of our children thrive tremendously. by those strong connections they can have and feeling secure. So where is that the best environment for them? But some of our sensitive kids, my goodness, do they ever feel overloaded in these environments, right? And how do you take care of a very sensitive child? You better have a very, very strong relationship, and that child better know you can collect and you can get in there and you can provide that support. So what does it mean for that child to feel taken care of?
So what is then some of the feedback that we're going to see in the child that indicates they feel taken care of?
Well, the fruits of a good attachment are essentially that the child wants to follow, right? And I'm not saying they'll never not want to do stuff. They have their own emotions and ideas which need to be understood. But if you collected the child would want to follow, tends to want to do the right thing, tends to obey, tends to, and again, this is never 100%, tends to want to be close to you, tends to want to reveal things to you, tends to adopt your values, tends to take comfort in you. You can lead in difficult situations like COVID. Right, this is what I need you to do. You get compliance. You can basically match them up to different people, and they will trust in those people that you're going to leave them with. They tend to trust you to make those decisions. You can feed them. You can put them to sleep a whole heck of a lot easier if you're in the lead and you have a good relationship. Let's just say parenting is just easier. You're not having to work at contrive. You're not thinking about the biggest stick that you have, or what do I have to use on this child to get them to do the right thing. Like you're not preoccupied with questions of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do to this child so they finally keep, that's not where you stay. Parenting is supposed to be rather fulfilling. I mean,
it's so often not,
but
right?
no, if you're not in right relationship, if the relationship is off, I can tell you nothing works well. You're not fulfilled, and I can guarantee your child is not fulfilled.
Yeah. It's interesting because what I found was that the idea of carrot and stick is exhausting because a parent has to always be one step ahead of what the kid is going to be motivated by, whether it's a punishment or a reward, right? Where attachments it's always the same. Maybe you talk in a different tone of voice but it's always the same. You don't have to learn new skills, right? If that's your go-to, this is what, I want to keep this relationship intact. And so at this age and at this stage, what is that going to look like? It varies slightly. But only matures with your children. But I just can't imagine how exhausting it must be to always be trying to think, okay, what's going to get that kid in the car? And if what it isn't going to work today, I guarantee you the gummy bear to get the child in the car seat is not going to keep the teenager at home. Right? It's not.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I think there's so much fear. There's so much fear. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't nip this in the bud right now, they're going to be doing this for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Which is not true, but I think there is that fear there.
Well, if there's a failure to mature, there is a chance they will be doing it for the rest of their life. And so the question then comes back to, well, how is it that a child matures? You can give as many gummy bears as you want. I know lots of adults, that gummy bears wouldn't fix their behavior problem and fails to, routinely. There's no threats, bribes, or punishments that's changing that behavior, it would seem. So where does maturity come from? Well, if you are mature and you grow up, you have a tempered mind. You're able to press down on your impulses. You're able to think before you speak. That you're able to think about others before you take action. That comes from maturity. So then the question is, how do we get maturity out of the seed that looks nothing like the apple tree, right? It's growth, it's development. Well, what is required? Well, a good relationship. My goodness, you better be able to steer and to lead and to provide information when required. But one of the biggest things that I ever did, and it was just a blessing learning this from Gordon, was just if one of the best discipline strategies besides collecting before you direct, so your child actually, you're using relationship to want to make them, to unlock the bias in them to follow you. It's relationship. But was soliciting good intentions. So before there's a problem, like we always work in when there is a problem, like you're going to the birthday party and the child isn't going to want to leave. Back in the day when we could just go to people's houses and eat their cake. We didn't have to worry about that. We would be worried about how to take our children home. Now we're sad that we can't get going. But So, but before I would go to the aquarium, or I would go to, the park, or I would go to a birthday party, I'd bring my little ones over, and usually only 3 and older, they can do this if they're attaching through belonging loyalty, and say, hey, listen, here's the deal. We're going to the birthday party. It's going to be fun. We're going to, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a good time. However, there's going to be a point that we're going to leave, and you're probably not going to want to leave because it's going to be having so much fun. It's really hard to leave a birthday party. It's really hard to leave the park. It's really hard to say goodbye. But here's the deal. Parks don't work unless we have goodbyes. Birthday parties don't work unless we can leave, unless we can come. So, and I count on you that when I say we're going to go, that we're going to go, right? I don't want any, my kids, I remember, ran away on me once and hid in somebody's house. I'm like, that's the last time I do that. I am not walking around like looking for you playing hide and seek when we're going. This is not on. This is not, I am not playing hide and seek in these conditions. And so it's just like, okay, how do I get ahead of it? Remember last time we went to the birthday party, there was that running around and playing hide and seek. Well, that's not on. Mama's not playing that game. That's not what we do at birthday parties. Can I count on you? Can I count on you to remember the rules of the birthday party? We go, we eat cake, we all love it, yes. If you don't like the presents there, or they say they don't like it, just keep it inside your head. Tell me later. Don't blurt it out. That's a really important one too. And but it's okay that you feel that way. It's okay if you hate the cake, but just keep it inside your head. Tell me later. And then when we go, Mommy's going to come up to you and we're going to go. Can I count on you? Okay, Mommy. Oh, we'll try. And you already hear the resistance in them, like, well, I don't know. But you're priming it. You're using relationship. Yeah. And preschoolers are lovely because they'll say, well, I can't do that. And you're like, well, I don't, we'll have to think about this because parks don't work without it, sweetie. It's not it's like they really don't actually work unless we can, do this. So maybe you're overplaying it in terms of what a child's able to do. You have to keep it within expectations. If a child really can't do it, then why are we taking them there? Can you go out for dinner in a busy restaurant and not scream and yell or throw your food at your sister? I know you're 2, but could you do this? You're like, no. Well, who has the word here? Why are we taking a 2-year-old to, I go to a restaurant to escape my 2-year-old at that point, and I go out with friends and get a babysitter. Nobody wants your 2-year-old throwing food at them. Right? I mean, it happens sometimes, but maybe it's beyond what developmentally is appropriate. Yeah. Take them for a picnic, enjoy it. Don't put yourself in that situation. But soliciting good intentions. Can I count on you? You get to the party, you get into their face, you collect them. Okay, are you having a good time? Yeah, it's all good, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's time to go. I don't want to. I know, sweetie. I know it's so hard to leave the party. Remember what we talked about? Yes, I do. Okay. Well, come on, let's go. Well, we'll continue to talk about it. Parties are hard to leave, and you're just trying to get out of that situation. But soliciting good intentions, what you're basically saying to the child is, I am your adult. I'll take care of you. Here's how the world works. Yeah. Can I count on you to follow? And you're using relationship, the most powerful force in the universe. You think gummy bears or something? Gummy bears have got nothing on connection. That child wants to do. That child wants to follow you. In every fiber, every cell in that child's brain wants to follow you. You got to unlock that desire and that motivation through your relationship, not through gummy bears. We look impotent. I'll give you a gummy bear. What you might as well say to the child is that I don't really feel too powerful as your parent, so I'm going to use sugar to get you to follow me because I don't feel too confident right now in who I am to you. That's what we're saying. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But soliciting good intentions, it primes the child to know what the values are, primes the child to get the steering wheel in their own life. Little 3-year-olds, I do it myself. You can see this. And you get a 13-year-old. Can I count on you to get the bathroom cleaned up sometime this weekend? Can I count on you to come to me for help with your homework if you need it? Can I count on you, your grandma's coming over. Can I count on you to spend some time over here, right? And not just disappear. Can I count on you? Can I count on you? Can I count on you? Those are the words of relationship. We should count on the people that we are close to. And that's how you bring a child, slowly steering them in that trajectory. That's just one disciplinary strategy, but I always give that out because you can do that instead of consequences. You do that instead of doing the hazmat kind of cleanup after there's been like a battle at the park. Like that, nobody.
But it does require you to control your own frustration and emotion if their counter will is bothering you.
How would their...
If you just want them to immediately get in line, follow you silently out to the car, no problems. And they're saying, oh, I really want to stay. It takes your self-control to say,
right. That's why
we're going to.
That's why we should be a little bit more mature than our children, because like their counter will is going to be frustrating. Whose counter will isn't? Whose counter will isn't?
True.
Like, my goodness, I turn on the news and I see people talking through their counter will all the time, and I'm frustrated with them. But I don't go and snack them or give them a timeout or tell them I'm gonna I don't know, yell at them or scare them. I mean, like.
We wouldn't do that to a spouse. I mean, ideally, I wouldn't do that to my husband.
Like, the whole idea is, of course, children are going to stir us up emotionally. Like, parents, it's like we're hit with an emotional tsunami and then we're surprised.
And maybe a part of that comes, is that not having our own needs met when we were small, and so now we're ill prepared to deal with the emotional needs of another person, right? I mean, that may play into it, but we can fix ourselves.
Yes,
right?
And I know that that's a popular message today, and it's not one I tend to share as much. I actually think we all come out of childhood not having our needs met completely. Because humans are infallible. And in teenage years, for the first time in our life, we actually have to take the steering wheel in our own hands in teenage years, and we actually have to have some courage to face into some difficult stuff. I actually think that the parents you had and what you did or didn't get is a terrible story to tell parents today, that somehow it equates that you had to learn your parenting from your parents, or that somehow your lacks and losses couldn't be addressed as an adult. It is in being the answer to a child that you develop. It's in your grief that you become the parent your child needs. Like, you don't know. Like, it probably wouldn't dawn on you too much that your parents didn't actually have room for a lot of your frustration until you became a parent and had to have lots of room for your child's frustration. They're like, hold on a second. I don't think I got this. And then you're like, well, hold on. I think it's a little too late. And you're like, but oh my gosh, my child needs me to be this answer. And all of a sudden you just find this incredible capacity inside of you to stretch. And you're like, what is happening to me? You're growing up. You're growing up. So I don't buy it that you had to have good parents. We would be extinct at this point if that were true. And you know what? I don't like to give it because I think it's too comfortable a place to hide and not face the vulnerable feelings that you have to face in being a parent. You can't get through this without feeling guilt, responsible, ashamed of yourself, right? And so frustrated with yourself. I have looked at my husband sometimes and said, oh my God, these poor children. They have us as parents. What? Like, geez, like we're just.
But there's something so beautiful about that guilt. I don't think we should be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Because it's what propels us to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, it should.
And that's how you have a relationship with it. And that's where the beauty comes from it, because that's where you feel the growth and the confidence when you don't stand in the way of someone else's perception of your child. When you weren't the shield that they needed, you're like, I will not do that again. I feel guilty about that. I feel ashamed. And trust me, you'll have 100 other more times to do something different, because it'll always come up again. And so then.
And when you say 100 times, you mean per day, right?
Yes. I hope not in some things, but yes. And you, over and over and over, you grow more confident. And that's where confidence comes from. It comes from having to put your feet in there and deal with the messy emotions of our children and the messy emotions that they evoke in us. But my goodness, it's the hardest job I think we'll ever do emotionally. And the most rewarding if we can get the dance right, because the fulfillment back on the end to think, oh my gosh, when you can see some sort of development in your child. And my daughter did an interview the other day for a job, and she gave an answer, and I said, well, how did you answer that? And she told me, and I'm just like, that was like the most beautiful answer. Like it came from inside of her, and you're just like, okay, I think the fruit's there, it's coming out.
Yeah. But it's such a long game, parenting is a long game, and I mean, it's now and I mean, it's really the fruit of delayed gratification that what you do now and what you learn now and how you grow now is going to have such an influence on your relationship with your adult children as you see them become, such a beautiful gift to see them become the people that they become, and that feels so fruitful. I want to share a story. Deborah, what's your time frame? I know you had a time limit.
I have a call.
Okay.
In 20 minutes.
Okay. So we can maybe I'll share the story, and then maybe we can wrap up with one more question. Christina, if you've got something
Sure.
there. That I was sitting around lamenting. I have, in our structure of my families, I have 3 daughters who are adults, 3 sons who are adults, and then I have 1 daughter left at home who's 14. And so sitting around with my 3 daughters having tea, they were all adults, they were kind of college age. And I was kind of lamenting the fact that, in a friendly way, we're having a lovely conversation, that they didn't get as practiced a parent as my younger kids got, because you get better at it as you have more kids, as you get older, you get, more patient and whatever. I was kind of lamenting this fact. And my daughter said this beautiful thing that I've shared many times with parents. She said, Mom, this is the oldest, Mom, we watched you trying to grow, and that had as much weight as being the beneficiaries of the more grown up parent. Right. And it was like this moment in time that I have counted that time hundreds of times that her saying that to me, that I just thought, wow, okay, here's where the long game plays big, right? The relationship you have with your adult children, right?
It's so beautiful. And it reminds me something that actually just came to light for me in the last month or so in doing the Neufeld conference that we just had, which was on becoming your child's answer. And it just reminds me that how wonderful that you could get there so quickly with your kids. But what I realized is that children, I think, have a lot more capacity to forgive when we make mistakes and are not their answer. But I think the biggest wound that creates such despair in children that is carried for a lifetime is that somehow we didn't care enough to figure out how to be their answer, that we gave up,
Yes.
or that they weren't somehow worth it. Because what happens is that child, when we see a struggle, they don't have to assume that they're not good enough, because they can see us struggling enough because they are. But if the parent isn't struggling and stretching, then I think a child takes that into their very core, that somehow they weren't worth the struggle. And they live a lifetime thinking somehow they weren't good enough, or they couldn't be good enough.
True.
And so this is where we must be so forgiving of ourselves, in that we will make mistakes being the answer. But my goodness, the caring that drives us to do this, that is not lost on our children. That is not lost on our children at all. That is the very definition of love, is that struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that willingness to repair when we do harm. I think, that for me has been so consoling to know that it's the desire, the willingness to repair is more important than the damage that was done, because everyone's going to screw up. It's whether or not you're willing to try to make it right again.
Are you holding
that separates the taking care of from the not taking care of.
Mm-hmm. Are you holding on taking responsibility for the relationship? Are you holding on? Are you taking responsibility? Mm-hmm. We can say sorry. They can still be mad at us. We might not even say sorry. It might just get back to the business of being their parent and deal with whatever we're messing up on. But do we take responsibility that we made a mess? Do we take responsibility we have to hold on? Do we have to, that we're responsible for the relationship? Mm-hmm. That's what it means to be the answer, for sure. Yeah.
Well, one thing it would be really great if you could touch on before we go is the process of maturation and like what you call the 5 to 7 shift, when preschool age children start to actually have these mixed feelings, and they can premeditate before they act, and they can understand they can start to feel empathy and think outside of themselves and all of that. How do parents, practically speaking, deal with the pre-reasonable child, because I think that is, I mean, it's hard enough to deal with a child who has reason and is capable of logic and things like that. But an illogical, unreasonable preschool age child who is coming into their counter will, telling you no, wanting to have their own way, all of those things.
You're talking hypothetically here, right, Christina?
Yeah, totally hypothetical.
Oh, you have a 3-year-old. You're so busted on this question.
So I found that your book was really practically helpful for both me and my husband in terms of the collecting and then redirecting or correcting. But I have so many mom friends who are a little bit behind me in the age range, and they come to me and they ask, what do you do with Joseph when he tells you no? And this is the biggest, it seems like this is the biggest thing for parenting just the whole way through, is what do you do when your child says no and they won't follow you? Yeah. And what if it's a really serious issue? Like they won't hold your hand when you cross the street, or they won't listen to you when you say, don't run out into the street, or they, just whatever it might be. How do you recommend, like, what's a relationship first approach to counter will in not just in preschool age children, but how does that look as they get older too? Well, and they start to actually integrate their brains.
Maturity saves us here in the 5 to 7 shift. I mean, they just get that, not brushing their teeth. You just let them think about it for a while and they just get back to brushing it because they don't
they don't want to get cavities.
Or they do homework because they don't want to, not do homework and still have to do it, and they want to get it done or clean up the room or whatever. So maturity takes care of a lot. This 5 to 7 shift is a beautiful shift. They get more tempered. They are, hopefully, this is when it's ideal. They understand that certain things are futile because we've held our nose and they've had their tears. So we shouldn't expect children just to follow along all the time. I think if you're not collecting, especially a preschooler, you're going to be in trouble because they lose you. They can only focus on one thing or person at a time. And if they're absorbed somewhere else, how many times we come in and basically just start telling them what to do without collecting. So collect. Like I could just, in my sleep, it would just, the answer would be collecting, because it's about focusing on relationship. Now, the interesting thing about a 3-year-old, the beautiful thing about a 3-year-old is they start to have their own mind. So you will have collected that child and they'll say, no, because they got their own mind. No, I will not. And then you say, okay, we can do that. No, I don't want to do that. And you'll be like, why are they just flipping through all these things? Because it's an age when they need to have their own mind sometimes. And it's not all the time. It's just, it comes up and down and you'll see it. And I'll never forget taking care of my friend's kid at the park. And I wanted to help him on this like metal duck that was on a spring. And he's like, no, get away from me. And I'm like, oh, if he falls, I'm going to be in trouble here with my friends. So I'm trying to go up and help him. Get away from me. Anyway, I was closing in and I wasn't given enough space, and I should have just backed off, but it was a little too close. So he got off the duck and he just charged at me, and he was like punching me like a bull, kind of pushing me back across the playground. And his mother came up and said, stop hurting Deb, which he wasn't doing. Like, give me a break. He's 3. He's not hurting me. He barely has he doesn't have any aim. It's just luck that he actually connected with my body. And he pushed me across the playground, and she was starting to get mad at him. And I just said, stop. He's just trying to have his own mind. And I got a little too close, and now he's frustrated. Yes, no, he can't. He shouldn't be touching me. We shouldn't do that. But, he's just trying to figure things out, and he got frustrated. But, so just in the moment, just try to give some room for expression. You can sidestep it. If my kid's locked down on a no, there's some things that you control the environment and some things you can't. Like if it was a no and it was about toilet training, you're kind of stuck because then you need their cooperation, or brushing their teeth, or getting them to bed, or getting them to eat. You need their cooperation. So you really got to either use something like soliciting good intentions or collecting. But if it was about going outside the house and she didn't want to wear a hat, she didn't want to hold hands, then we leave the park or we don't go outside, and you can cry about that because my job is to keep you safe. If you're not going to hold hands, then we're going, not like I'm punishing you, but I got to keep you safe. This isn't working. It's too hard to hold hands right now. It's just, this place doesn't work without hand holding. I'll keep you safe. I'll take care of you. That's relationship. So sometimes they need to cry about the futilities that are there. 3-year-olds will have to run into some futilities. It's an age when they're just learning. They can't always get their way. They can't change their mind. They can't always be first. It's not all about them, blah, blah, blah.
A lot of hard life lessons.
But here's the beauty in nature's wisdom. The brain is only 25% developed. Why? At birth. Only 25% developed. Because it is meant to help you, the parent, shape the child for the world they live in, the futilities that exist. If you live in Australia, you have 50% of the world's most dangerous insects and bugs and everything else. I imagine going outside to play in the backyard may look a little different for some of those kids in Australia versus if you live in Port Coquitlam and there's bears and cougars, right? So, there's futilities that come with our world. And the brain is not developed at birth so that we get to shape that, but we have to shape it in a way through relationship to make sure the emotional lessons can be learned. If a child is only alarmed, there is no emotional change in the brain. It's just a constant state of alert, and there's no changes in the emotional center, nor can the prefrontal cortex grow under the state of alarm. So we've got to move in. Sometimes it's time for tears. Sometimes it's time to use connection and the secret to preschoolers is play. Just make anything playful and they'll follow you. If it's coercive at all, take your eyes right off the coercion. If I was going grocery shopping, the best was when they had the little buggies that the kids could have. Do you want to have that? Or do you think you're big enough to help me put that in the buggy? I can do that. And you just put play into it. Let's see if we can discover the bread. Do you know where the bread is? It's like playing hide and seek in the store. They move the bread. Let's go see. As soon as you put some play into it with a preschooler, when there's a lot of coercive elements, preschooler is they're blinded to it. And then by, 5 to 7, then they've accepted the futilities if you've had enough tears about the things they can't change. So sometimes it's time for tears. Sometimes it's time to lead, but just collect whatever you do. Make sure you're collecting. Otherwise, they just do not want to follow.
I have to tell this funny story that happened today. My 3-year-old was under the table. Our dining room table is really high and he likes to play under there. And he's been told many times that if his toys are on the floor, his little brother has access. And I can't always keep little brother from touching his toys that are on the floor. But if he wants to put them up high, then he can be sure that little brother won't touch them. And of course, he wanted to play on the floor. He insisted on playing on the floor. So little brother got close. I was right by them, right outside of the table, trying to talk my 3-year-old through this and trying to reason with him.
I think you should call preschoolers pre-reasonable from now on.
Pre-reasonable logic on someone who has none.
I know. So shocking that this didn't work. He just reaches over and pushes the baby over.
That's what he's called business. This 3-year-old.
I grabbed the baby and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Nico. That was my fault. I should have taken you out of that situation a lot sooner." And my 3-year-old goes, "No, it was my fault." He was like, "I want to take responsibility for this. I did that. You didn't."
I remember a research study saying that, high stressful jobs like air traffic controllers, if you put them in with a childcare arrangement, a childcare setting, they'd lose their mind. Like their stress level is beyond. And you're like, oh my gosh, the 3-year-old, the 1-year-old have outsmarted me. But just to put something into practice here, if you know sharing, okay, if you have a 3-year-old, sharing's overrated. They don't share. It's all about.
Oh yeah, I know they don't share.
So how would we get ahead of it? How would you use soliciting good intentions? How would you get ahead of the problem and not get caught into it?
Well, I mean, I think what I would have done was say, how long would you like to play on the floor? I'll go distract your brother while you play on the floor for a little bit while longer. But then after the timer's off, you need to put your toys up high if you don't want him to play with them.
Yeah.
That would have
You're
been a
leading-
good thing to do.
You're leading, and you can see you can do a lot of different things that way. We're going to pick out the toys you're going to play with. This is it, and then you got 10 minutes, and then brother's going to come, or whatever it is. But you're leading in the situation. But we get caught with our pants down all the time, and you try to. It's quite humorous. I've got many stories actually like that where I'm just like, this didn't quite work. And then you just lead forward, but you'll have that 100 times over about not sharing and all the rest of it because they don't.
Oh, and the baby is walking now, so that's creating a whole another level of alarm for my 3-year-old. Like, oh, this child is now able to walk. What?
What?
Pretty harmless before.
Not expecting this.
Yeah, but supervision is the key. Supervision leadership. You compensate for the fact they have no impulse control and don't expect them to. He doesn't know how to share. He doesn't know how to do any of that. You set up the parameters. Like if you watch preschool teachers, they're all about structure, routine. Everybody's got a place. Everybody knows that place. I'm like, ooh, they're smart. That's structure routine because preschoolers attached to structure routine and supervision, and they just follow along. And that's when it tends to go a lot easier. But oh my goodness, it's just so interesting how these littlest of people can absolutely baffle the adults, and that takes and myself included. I remember like, how is it that a 3-year-old is taking me down? I got a PhD. This is giving me nothing.
I'm afraid to start bedtime. I'm afraid. I'm afraid to say, let's get in the car. I'm afraid of you.
I would say to my husband sometimes, I don't negotiate with terrorists, but I'm feeling kind of stuck here. Like, oh my gosh, they've locked down on me. We find our way through. A sense of humor is good to keep. But yeah, just keep leading. Keep leading.
And to have like-minded women around you. That's huge, right? To have, so which is why, we brought you on the show, why we do what we do, because I just think that's too important. We need community of like-minded people for sure. Deborah, I'm going to ask you, I will sign off because I know you have another commitment, but I'm going to ask you to just stay on for a moment. I just want to grab a couple of resources from you so I can put them in our show notes. So we will wrap up. Thank you so much. This has been a huge blessing to our listeners, for me personally. For you too, Christina. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's a good chat.